Hi, this is Craig Johnson from the Teneo Group. I'm here with Wade Woolwine, who is with Rapid7, Insight MDR Manager, and we're here to talk a little bit about best practices and incident response to threats. Before we get started with that and hand it over to Wade, I'm going to give you a quick introduction to the Teneo Group and what we do and why we are introducing Rapid7. The Teneo Group themselves is a cybersecurity firm. We built our organization based off of the cybersecurity industry best practices. If you look up SANS-20 or CIS-20, you'll see kind of how we've designed and built our practices. With that in mind, we have partnered with organizations like Rapid7 and Checkpoint Software Technologies because we feel that they have the best solutions within the market and match up to our idea of service. With that note, one of the things that we are discussing is security as a service. Service as a service, and it's kind of interesting in that mindset that we're trying to put service back into as a service. One of the reasons why we chose Rapid7 as a partner is they have the great solution as it comes into vulnerability management and detection and intrusion detection and response, but they've added on an extra layer on top of it for managed detection and response. That's one of the parts we're going to be talking about today. So at this point in time, what I'm going to do is hand it over to Wade, and he's going to do a quick overview of Rapid7 and what they do, and then we're going to dive into the industry best practices and the Insight MDR.
Thank you very much. And, it's no wonder why services like Rapid7's MDR are gaining traction in the marketplace. Things are just getting worse from an attacker-defender perspective. You really have to step up your game if you are going to be connected to the Internet. I mean, even just the most common pieces of malware and threats out there are costing businesses trillions, and that's not even counting the targeted threats that are perpetrated by nation-state threat actors or industrial espionage or generally organized crime. And so as a company, Rapid7 is really here to help our customers in two key areas related to security program development, and that is the attack surface management piece and the incident detection and response. So when we look at our capabilities as Rapid7, whether we're talking about our products or our services, we've really aligned everything around these three pillars. Am I vulnerable? Am I compromised? And am I optimized? And realistically, this is the order in which all organizations should be asking this question. Ultimately, if you are targeting, am I vulnerable, and you're doing vulnerability scans and you're doing appropriate patching, you're really taking care of the low-hanging fruit that is the bane of the IT administrator's day job. When you look at the second category under am I compromised, you're really trying to identify whether or not a common or targeted threat has made it through into your environment. And then last but not least, am I optimized? Once you know that you've taken care of the attack surface, you know that you're not compromised, how are you building your security programs to evolve year over year, threat over threat? How are you building programs that mature over time? So when you look at the alignment of our product suite, and again, this is Rapid7's product suite under these components, you have Insight VM, which is focused on vulnerability management, identifying vulnerabilities within your traditional network, and then also outside within the modern network, your cloud-based services, your IT as a service services, and so on and so forth. Then we look at the applications that sit on top of those systems. And with Insight AppSec, you're able to evaluate your web presence against vulnerabilities. And then Metasploit, of course, being one of our flagship products, the most widely used penetration testing tool in the world. Moving into am I compromised, Insight EDR and MDR, which is what we're here to talk about today, the managed detection and response service here at Rapid7 uses Insight EDR as the cornerstone of our technology stack in order to deliver this solution. And then last but not least, am I optimized? We're looking at Insight Ops, which is our operations visibility tool. We're looking at our automation orchestration platform, Insight Connect, which we just announced and released yesterday. We're also looking at our services and our managed services, because not only do we strive to help you with the tactical around detection and response, we're also helping you build your security programs. We're moving towards preventing threats from happening in your environment versus just detecting and responding to them. So let's talk a little bit more about the MDR solution really at a high level. We'll go into some depth around how we built our security operations center, our best practices for managing our team and the threats. But at a high level, our MDR service offering is really here to use the best of the best when it comes to technology, couple that technology with the best of the best when it comes to people, and then we wrap the process around this in order to deliver a 24/7 solution that is not only adept at helping you against known threats, but also those unknown targeted threats. I myself have been in this industry for quite some time. I've built a number of different managed services, such as the one here at Rapid7, including Mandiant and FireEye, managed detection and response. And prior to doing the MDR thing, I was a practitioner myself, large enterprise, small enterprise, government, and so on and so forth. When you look at our team of analysts, who are really our pride and joy, even our most junior analyst has responded to over 300 breaches. So we take the people that we bring to the service very, very seriously, and we partner with our engineering teams here at Rapid7 in order to make Insight IDR the best it can be. And before we really dive into the meat of this presentation around how to set up your security operations center, just a different representation of the way that we look at the totality of the Rapid7 products and services, how they align, how they help our customers. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we want to collect data once, and we want to use it in a number of different ways. So as an example, our endpoint agent that we'll be talking about with Insight IDR and for MDR is also the same endpoint agent that you use with your vulnerability management solution. So all of our products and technologies are engineered to share the right amount of data to drive the appropriate workflows and to move from detection of an issue, whether that be a vulnerability or a threat, and quickly move to remediation. So with that, let's talk a little bit about selecting your SOC solution and really kind of using this topic to back into how we've built things in managed detection and response. Because there are never enough intro slides. Here's another one for me if you wanted to get a look at what I look at today. I think Craig would say that there is less beard and more hair, and he would not be wrong. So over the next 45 or so minutes, we're going to be covering a bunch of different topics as it relates to what you want to be looking at as you're selecting your security operations solution, your MDR solution, your 24/7 coverage. And, peppered in here is a little bit of build versus buy, right? Some organizations are going to choose to build their own capabilities in-house. They're going to be able to lay out the capital needed in order to build the teams and buy the technology and really build a tailored solution to meet their specific needs. While the majority of companies out there are not going to have that level of capital to invest, they're not going to want to undertake not only the building, but the maintaining of a 24/7 capability. So as we dive into what makes SOC teams successful, we're going to be talking about technology. We're going to be talking about security program maturity. We're going to be talking about hiring and training and therefore retaining talent. We're going to be talking about reporting and metrics, not just from a justifying our existence to the folks that are paying us, but also using reporting and metrics as an internal motivator. We're going to talk about the capabilities that your SOC, that a modern SOC really should be bringing to the table. And one of my favorite topics, one of the keys to success here with us in MDR is really the management and authority that we give to our SOC analysts and that our customers really in turn give to us in order to perform action. So let's first start talking about the issues. When you're building a 24/7 operations center in-house, the very, very first thing that I typically hear from folks is, look, we're really worried about recruiting and retention. And realistically, you wouldn't be wrong. We are a service provider. We deliver managed detection and response services to well over 300 customers. Our security operations team has all of the tools that they could possibly need in order to do their job, and they have the appropriate management structure, and therefore they are happy analysts. They are glad to come to work. They are happy working on the shifts. They live and breathe finding evil. And so the reason why we're able to do that realistically is because we have such a wide breadth of visibility. Any given day, our analysts are going to be looking at the manufacturing sector or the healthcare sector or the retail sector or the financial services sector. Not one day is the same as the previous one, and that's really what keeps highly technical, highly intelligent people engaged. When we're looking, again, at building your own and the types of issues you encounter, it is not readily apparent what sorts of metrics you should be communicating to your executives to justify return on investment. It is not obvious what types of metrics you should be leveraging internally in order to motivate teams. Really, the whole reporting metrics and ROI is probably worth the webcast on its own. But suffice it to say, this is one of the things that I hear in the consulting work that I do here at Rapid7 through our global services organization. Training, keeping up with training. If you look at the top-ranked training for incident detection and response analysts, you're looking at SANS, and each one of those training courses is anywhere between $2,500 and $5,000. Sending an entire team, keeping their skill set where it needs to be is extremely challenging and difficult. And now we're just even now getting into the technology discussion of things. And when you look at your price tag for building a SOC internally, technology is really going to be the cheapest part. You pay a lot of money once, you pay some maintenance fees, but realistically your biggest headcount or your biggest cost is going to be around headcount, around maintaining the people aspect of your technology. Management, authority, and continuous investment are really kind of the last three that I'm going to highlight on this particular slide. We as a company put a lot of investment into training our managers, training our leaders, making sure that we are creating an environment that really encourages folks to bring the best of the best to their job. And that investment does not come cheap. There's a lot of training involved. There's a lot of selection to identify the right managers, to identify the right leaders. And not all organizations are equipped to kind of drive a really heavy, really expert team and provide them the level of management and career opportunities that they would need. Now, issues aren't just limited to folks going out and trying to build their own. There are issues when you go out and buy. A lot of the feedback that I hear from the analysts out there, and of course we do a lot of calls with Forrester and Gartner and IDC and so on and so forth. So this is a list of pain points that I've heard from those particular vendors. The lack of visibility is probably chief amongst them. Yes, in theory, you have gone and you have paid for a service that is supposed to do all this work for you and give you a deliverable, but there's a lot of trust that goes in there, and trust is really difficult to come by if you can't trust and verify. So the lack of visibility makes it so that a lot of folks are shying away from MDR providers because realistically, they don't know if they're doing a right job in their environment. That dovetails very quickly into the lack of partnership. If you are engaging with someone who is going to be providing as critical of a function as incident detection and response, and you don't feel like you're getting that partnership, you almost feel like you're at the mercy of the professionalism of your vendor. And so building that partnership, having that trust, being able to for lack of a better term, go to war together against the threat is ultimately what we strive for here in MDR. And then rounding out the last four, quality issues, again, tying to number one, lack of visibility. The return on investment is the value that I'm getting out of the service that you're delivering worth the money that I pay for. The lack of tailoring, right? Every organization is going to be different. Every program is going to have different priorities. And so one of the pieces of feedback that we receive regularly is, we really want to make sure that the service is tailorable for our needs, for our criticality levels, for our business priorities. And of course, we do provide that here in MDR. And then last but not least, talking about the lack of partnership and lack of visibility, there's really no shared use model. A lot of organizations, especially organizations that fall in kind of the SMB or what I would call lower maturity, low to maturing security programs, are really looking for for lack of a better term, group buy. They want to buy some technology, they want to buy some expertise, but they want to be able to use that technology as well as the experts. And so that shared use model is becoming more and more important. So what do you really need to be thinking about when it comes to build versus buy? And at the end of the day, when you're talking to your executives, when you're talking to your board, it's going to come down to money. Let's not kid ourselves. The business world functions on money. So is it worth you investing upwards of a few $1 million in building the capability yourself, or you want to shoulder that cost a little bit more on a subscription basis by engaging with a provider like Rapid7's MDR? And here are a few questions that you can really ask yourself that help you, beyond the money aspect of things, that help you make that decision. So let's talk a little bit about security program maturity, because a lot of organizations look at a 24/7 MDR as a luxury, which realistically, to a certain extent, it is. You wouldn't want to be a level 1 maturity and introducing an MDR service offering on top of your lack of IT controls, on top of your lack of security investment. This is not a silver bullet type solution. It's not going to solve all of your problems. It's not going to serve you coffee first thing in the morning. The way that we typically look at maturity is on the scale that you see in front of you. So from left to right, we're looking at 5 different levels of maturity, left being the least mature, right being the highest maturity level. And then within those maturity levels, there are 7 key areas that we evaluate, going from being prepared for having a security program all the way down to constantly learning and constantly maturing your offering through lessons learned. Now, this is an eyesore of a slide, so I apologize ahead of time. I'm not going to go into the detail. But the reason why I bring up this slide is because somewhere between maturity level 1 and 2, you're really going to want to start looking at how you're going to be able to handle incident detection and response above and beyond putting a firewall, putting an antivirus, putting a web proxy. The technology solutions out there are part of a portfolio, but they are not the entirety of a portfolio. The technology, people, and process trifecta that we've been talking about for the better part of 25 years is really where that answer is at. So this is the expectation of most organizations around what a security operations center should do. So starting with threat prevention, again, threat prevention is not so much a human capability as much as it is a technology capability. So when we built our service offering here in Managed Detection and Response, we wanted to make sure that we let technology do what technology was good at and let humans do what humans are good at. Technology is going to be exceptionally good at processing a large amount of data and preventing known threats from happening. That's what your antivirus does. That's what your firewall does. That's what your network intrusion prevention system does. And we have to let those tools do their thing. So even though the SOC would be primarily responsible for threat prevention, they're really responsible for tuning the technology that goes into driving that threat prevention. Now, when we start bringing in the human aspect of things, we start talking about threat detection. And we have a couple slides here, or we have several slides in a couple slides that will help us kind of deep dive into threat detection and what that means. In addition to doing threat detection, we also want our Security Operations Center to be able to do threat hunting. It's not enough to wait for the technology to give us an indication that there might be a threat somewhere. We have to go out and proactively look for it. Once we have identified a threat, those capabilities need to include breach response. Long gone are the days when threat detection was done out of the SOC and incident response was done by a highly specialized team. Here at MDR, our incident responders are actually our Tier 3 analysts, and they sit side by side with our SOC analysts. They are constantly there in the same room, working on the same work, so that the expertise that our incident responders have gained over their years and years and years of work is readily available to our more junior analysts who are looking to learn. Once we've responded to the breach and put out the fire, we need to report. That's the ugly side of security. I think most consultants would agree. We all love fighting the fight. We all hate doing the reporting. But ultimately, at the end of the day, the reporting is the way that we communicate with our customers. That is the way that we show the value. That is the way that we drive for meaningful change in our customer environments. And last but not least, I am a management nerd, so you will find that there is lots of management on my slides because I feel like, especially in a highly critical, highly sensitive, highly stressful job like threat detection incident response, you need to offset the grind of the day-to-day with exceptional management, exceptional investment in career development, exceptional investment in making sure that we are providing the right working environment for these folks that are going above and beyond for our customers. So if your SOC needs to do all those things, they're going to need a handful, a very large handful of very expensive things. Technology. So again, we'll talk about technology here in the coming slides, so I'm just going to breeze over it very quickly. They're going to need training. We've touched on that. Training is extremely expensive, and doubly so for us here at Rapid7. We maintain a very, very large team of security analysts to deliver the services across all of our customers. And so in order to offset those costs, we spend a lot of time having the folks who attend training or the folks that are driving on continuous learning, continuous improvement, as well as a couple of our individuals who are SANS instructors, to give weekly training sessions here in our Security Operations Center in Alexandria, Virginia. So on a weekly basis, here we have coffee and knowledge bombs, right, because every security analyst drinks copious amounts of coffee and Red Bull. Those are hour-long sessions where we share information about breaches that we've investigated or new techniques that we've discovered. The threat intel team comes in and talks about those quite a bit. Separately, we have Malware Tuesdays, where we really dive into the particulars of malware analysis. And then we also have a weekly joint meeting with our incident response team in global services so that they can brief us on the investigations that they're driving. So in addition to paying a pretty penny to make sure that our folks are getting certified and continuously learning in the old-fashioned way, we also do a lot of cross-training here within our Security Operations Center. Metrics, that's a big one. It's really a double-edged sword. The metrics that our executives typically want are going to encourage the wrong behaviors from our SOC analysts. Executives always want to know how many alerts a particular individual closed, how fast they're closing particular alerts. And what we found is that encourages the wrong behaviors. Analysts are looking at speed instead of quality. So here at Rapid7, and we'll talk about this in a little bit more depth here in a couple slides, here at Rapid7, we do maintain those metrics around timing, but those metrics are actually to evaluate the effectiveness of our engineering teams. It is incumbent upon our engineering teams to make our analysts faster at their jobs. Our analysts need to be worried about the quality of the work that they're putting out. So our analysts are rated on a peer QA of the threat reports that we send out, as well as feedback from our customers on the quality of the reports and the information included in those reports. They also need authority, right? Especially if you're talking about a SOC within your own enterprise, something that you've built yourself. You can't very well have a senior security analyst saying that the world is about to fall apart and have a manager in IT say, no, you can't do anything about this threat because it's going to endanger one of my servers. I'm sorry, but endangering one of your servers versus having all of your servers compromised is, a pretty black and white type answer. So your SOC does need authority to take action. And then last but not least, again, management keeps on cropping up. Good management, happy analysts, that's the way it goes. All right, let's now deep dive into the technology side of things. So this is an extremely ugly slide. I apologize. I am my own marketing person, so I created these slides. We're going to start by talking about threat prevention, but you are going to see over the next 4 slides that the division of the slides, the 3 sections that I've divided the slides into, represent from left to right. On the left, the internet. In the middle, your internal network, the network that all of your users are on. And if you are doing defense in depth, the zone all the way on the right should represent where you keep your most sensitive data and your most sensitive applications. So consider that a segregated environment or a highly protected environment within your organization. So from left to right, when we're talking about threat prevention, from the outside in, we're really talking about 2-factor authentication. You don't want attackers to be able to just walk right in through your front door completely unnoticed. You want to make sure that you are using best practices around authentication and authorization, whether you're talking about remote access solutions like VPN or talking about access to your cloud-based solutions or your software as a service type solutions. Most of the folks that we talk to really just haven't adapted to the whole fact that half of their enterprise is actually moving outside of their control. They're moving to internet cafes. They're moving to software as a service providers. They're moving outside of the traditional perimeter that you're used to protecting. Once you move from the internet to your inside zone, you're going to start looking at network and endpoint-based threat prevention. You just want to snipe known bad out of wherever it resides. There's plenty of technology out there that is going to be very adept at getting rid of those known threats. Now, don't think that technology layer is enough, but again, trying to let technology do what technology does best and letting the people do what they do best. When we're talking about threat prevention, it's really about technical solutions that you're putting in place. It's almost a set it and forget it type approach because you're just trying to limit the volume of threats that your people need to look at in threat detection. So as we move through that general internal zone to that highly protected zone, you're really going to want to focus on authentication and authorization. Far too many Active Directory environments that we look at are really just the equivalent of any on firewalls. Anyone who is authorized to authenticate to the Active Directory is authorized to access any resource within the environment. While that might be true, in some cases, I would argue that is absolutely not true in most cases. There is no reason why the office manager for our Security Operations Center should have access to our engineering resources. She does not code. She is exceptionally gifted at making sure that we're happy and have plenty of caffeine, but she's not going to be the one coding. So here at Rapid7, our office managers cannot access our code. I recommend the same on your end. And as you're moving down to the host level, to the application level of where your most sensitive applications and data reside, you're going to want to look at application threat prevention. You're going to want to look at data theft prevention, DLP type solutions. So moving from prevention to detection, you're going to, again, recognize that same kind of layered approach for how I'm representing the modern enterprise. And you're going to see a lot of the same types of technology, but instead of the word prevention, I'm using the word detection. There is a different rule set that you're going to use for your network threat prevention technology versus your network threat detection technology. As an example, we will move to prevent critical, well-known threats from materializing on the environment. So our prevention rule set is going to be extremely limited to very, very high fidelity, high confidence type indicators. However, when we look at the types of rules that we apply in threat detection, we take a little bit of a contrarian view. We would actually rather have more alerts than less alerts because we give our SOC analysts the tools that they need to action those alerts very quickly, to get the context that they need to make a decision in under 60 seconds whether an alert or a sequence of alerts is good or bad. So most organizations, most products are going to be telling you, we try to reduce the number of alerts that you look at every day, whereby SOC analysts that are literally sitting right behind you right now are actually saying, no, we want more alerts, but we want more context. We want more flexibility around grouping. We want better suppressions. That is ultimately what we build for them. Back to the slide, moving in, network threat detection, endpoint threat detection, very similar type technologies to prevention, just a different rule set. Intruder traps and user anomalies are going to do well at identifying attackers trying to pivot from that trusted but loose environment to that trusted and extremely secure environment. And then again, we're going to see the application level threat detection and the DLP data theft type prevention. When we talk about threat hunting, it's really about acquiring as much data as possible, giving that to the hands of the analysts and giving them the appropriate tools to, as one of my principal analysts like to say, burn down all the hay so that we can find the needles. And really, if you look at our approach to threat hunting, that's ultimately what we do. We use our endpoint agent, we use our SIM in order to aggregate really a lot of data, and we partnered with our data science and research teams in order to build the data views that our analysts need in order to burn down that hay so that they can find the needles. When we talk about threat hunting in the context of the MDR service, we're really talking about a safety net. We're very confident in the way that we look for threats in a real-time basis. We apply 3 separate methodologies, including traditional threat intelligence, looking for known threats, including user behavior analytics, looking for user anomalies, and attacker behavior analytics, which is a very advanced detection engine that actions all of the real-time data that our platform cannot collect. So really powerful tool. And then these threat hunts are really just that safety net, making sure that anything that's slipped through those technology-based detections, we can detect with the power of our humans. And then last but not least, kind of at the end of the workflow, once we have identified a threat, once we've validated and investigated, we're going to want to move towards containment. And this is where we're going to be able to use a lot of the this is interesting. I think my slides got garbled up. You're seeing a whole bunch of log data where we should be seeing containment. So let me just walk through this slide. You know, at the outside of your perimeter, you're going to want to use your firewalls. You're going to want to use a DNS sinkholing in order to contain a particular breach. Within your environment, you're going to want to use your network choke points if you're doing defense in depth. You're going to want to use your endpoint agent in order to issue containment or kill processes. And then when you move into the inside of your environment, you're going to want to be able to tune those permissions. If an attacker has stolen credentials, you want to disable that account. You want to make sure that they're not able to pivot from that untrusted network to that high-trust network. Hiring and training. When I started in this industry, I was not paid nearly as much as I have to pay my security analysts today. The cost of talent in this industry is rising considerably. And so the kind of first gotcha that I talk to customers about when they're looking to build their own security programs is a reality check on how much you're going to be paying for these resources. You know, if you look at a tier 1 analyst who for us is 2 to 4 years experience, again with some solid experience in incident detection and breach response, you know, you're looking at paying upwards of $70K for those resources, and that becomes really, really expensive when you consider that there's a minimum of 12 people required to run a 24/7 operation. So compensation is going to be the barrier of entry just to get them in the door, just to get their butt in the seat. Retaining them requires a whole different level of investment. You're going to need to drive on training. You're going to need to drive for growth. And the experience thing at the top is actually a really interesting one, because one of the things that I recommend if you're looking to build the capability internally is really to hire those most experienced people first, those 125K plus people first, because they are going to be able to help you with hiring and training and identifying growth opportunities and really doing all of those things that you may individually lack the subject matter expertise for. And again, coming back to metrics, you know, for me, because I'm a people manager, because I came up through the ranks of analysis, team performance is really where I look to apply the metrics. Again, I'm a realist. I am a business owner here at Rapid7, so the actual margin-based performance is of course interesting to me as a business person, but when you're talking about motivating teams, you're really looking to make sure that the team that's being built to support your SOC is first planning and keeping to their plan. So some of the metrics that I typically recommend for new teams, if you're looking to measure the performance of the team, is adherence to hiring plan. There is nothing worse for morale than having 5 open headcount for your SOC that you're unable to fill for one reason or another. So making sure that you are bringing in the relief where you need to bring in the relief for the teams is going to be kind of metric number 1. Metric number 2 for me is adherence to training plan. Those attackers are getting better every single day. They are motivated by pure money to learn how to do things better, quicker. You know, at the end of the day, these professional hacker teams, they're no different than you and I trying to run our business, right? They're trying to increase profit and drive margin. And so they're constantly improving their operations. They are constantly looking to get better. If your defender teams aren't doing the same, man, you're in trouble. Employee satisfaction is a huge metric for us, not just here within the SOC, where at the slightest sign of a dip in employee satisfaction, it's almost like the leadership team swarms into action to see what we can do about it, because that slight dip can really quickly turn into a tidal wave. So being able to measure employee satisfaction, really to notice trends, is going to be super important, as long as you are equipped to respond to those trends. So very important as well. Employee retention really ties into employee satisfaction. At the end of the day, recruiting, bringing in new headcount, incurring the cost of spin up and training is extremely expensive if your turnover rate is very high. So, similar to a business where your model is really, acquire a customer once and keep them for a long time, because the cost of acquiring the customer is so huge. It's the same thing when it comes to employee and retention. And then, last but not least, and this is specific for us, but it could be also applied in the internal use case, customer satisfaction. Are we doing the right things for our customers? Here at Rapid7, we're really draconian about that. We have a huge investment in a UX team, a user experience team, that is not only focused on products and services and how our customers are consuming them, but the experience that our customers have in onboarding or during the service or during incident response. We bring those researchers in to run questionnaires and polls and in-person interviews, because knowing whether our customers are satisfied or dissatisfied and understanding exactly why really allows us to grow over time, to stay in touch with what our customers want from us. Again, we're kind of on the theme of metrics here. Threat prevention. I'm going to summarize the next few slides really quickly, and then we'll kind of dive into details. So when I look at metrics between the different disciplines involved with incident detection and response, so preventing threats, detecting threats, responding to threats, containing threats, the effectiveness of the program is actually how good the previous layer is doing at shielding the current layer. So as an example, we talked about threat prevention, shielding the detection layer from stuff that's just run-of-the-mill, stuff that technology should just really be able to easily take care of, easily block, easily delete, easily clean up. When you look at threat detection's job is to minimize the amount of work that the incident response team needs to do. So the threat detection team charter is really to identify the breach as early as possible in the attack life cycle, so that response and containment activities can be done very, very quickly. In the incident response world, you're looking to scope the breach appropriately, so you only have to go through remediation once. So the metrics that we're going to be talking about in the next 3 slides really are intended to represent how effective one layer of IDR is at shielding the next layer of IDR. So when we look at threat prevention specifically, the SOC team is not in your threat prevention technology actively looking at the alerts that are generated. That is not a good use of these very expensive resources' time. They should be looking at trends. Are we seeing an uptick in a spear phishing attack vector, or are we seeing an uptick in this particular family of botnet, or are we seeing an uptick in threats targeting a particular vulnerability or a particular person? All of these are going to be really important to know where you need to invest more of your time in detection. So if, for example, your threat prevention technology is telling you that there's an uptick in spear phishing, spending more time looking for browser drive-bys is probably not the best use of your resources. So being able to follow those trends and adjust your approach is going to be critical in tailoring the security program to the threat landscape and to your business. When we talk about the effectiveness of reducing the amount of work between detection and prevention, one of the other metrics that you can look to measure is how many threats from the detection layer actually had prevention indicators created for them. That then represents a shift in cost from your people to your technology. So that's a green box there if you're seeing that the detection team is really working with that threat prevention technology to minimize the work that they need to do. How many threats were missed by the prevention technology? So is there a positive or negative trend in the utilization of your people at the detection layer of incident detection and response? That's what that metric is going to show you. And last but not least, visibility coverage. This is typically something that I recommend for organizations that are looking to build their program from the ground up. Identifying the threat vectors, the ways in which attackers can come at you, and building a strategy around those particular vectors is going to make sure that you have the appropriate level of visibility. Of course, you can't build everything all at once, so being able to say, okay, well, this quarter we were able to provide 55% visibility coverage for our SOC or for our detection technology. Next quarter, we're targeting 75%, and by the end of the year, we want to be at 100%. That's the kind of metric that really resonates well with your executives. Detection and threat hunting, again, very similar to prevention, but really geared at the detection side of things. Here, you're really going to want to look at trends as well. You're going to want to see where your technology is performing from a detection perspective, how your analysts are doing at handling those particular types of threats. Again, if you're seeing an uptick in a particular threat vector, you should probably align your resources on that threat vector. Traditional military intelligence type thing. If they're taking the hill, don't run towards the river. Detection methodology, we haven't spent a ton of time on detection methodology, so I apologize for that. But if you employ multiple threat detection technologies within your IDR program, being able to measure the effectiveness and the cost of those particular threat detection methodologies is going to allow you to kind of twist the knobs and refine where you're spending your money. So here at Rapid7, again, we have those three real-time threat detection methodologies: threat intel, UBA, and ABA, user behavior analytics, and attacker behavior analytics. We're constantly looking at the efficacy of those detections and the rules within those detections, and we're constantly tuning them. Whether that's work that we're doing with the threat intel team or the engineering team or the data science team, we're constantly evaluating how well those methodologies are doing. The complex to simple indicator count, well, look, from a compute standpoint and from an analysis standpoint, complex indicators are a lot more expensive than simple indicators. So how good is your intel team doing at deriving simple indicators from very complex indicators or complex investigations? Using that time investment, using those teams to translate the complex to the simple is going to ultimately reduce your cost in the long term from both a compute and a human perspective. New threat hunts created. This is something that we like to do internally because we enable our frontline folks to influence the way that we look for threats in our customer environments. This goes from allowing them to provision new rules and attacker behavior analytics, allowing them to provision new simple indicators, allowing them to create new user behavior analytics, new correlations, and create new threat hunts. So, our MDR customers today might be getting a threat hunt with 14 different techniques used. Next quarter, it might be 16. The quarter after that, it might be 24. So we're constantly improving the way that we look at these threat hunts, the way that we can reuse the data that we've already collected to generate additional value. And again, last but not least, the visibility coverage. And moving into containment and remediation, this is ultimately this is the worst case scenario, let's not lie, because the threat has made it through your prevention, it was detected at some point in time, required some response, and now you're doing containment remediation. The way that we like to look at this is if the threat has gotten this far, if we're spending 100 or 200 or 300 hours on a breach investigation, realistically, we failed somewhere along the line. Our job is really to prevent threats from moving in, detect the threats as early as possible, but at the end of the day, our mission is really to prevent our customers' brand from receiving irreparable damage or financial damage in some way, shape, or form. We're not here to prevent threats from happening in the first place, because if we set that goal, we'd be failing every single day, and that doesn't seem like real good motivation to me. So we set our goals to kind of minimize the impact of a breach, whether that means preventing it from happening or detecting it as early as possible, or really driving, very, very high quality incident response so that we can move to scope and remediate a breach once versus a number of different times. So again, more metrics that we can drive towards here. These are all pretty self-explanatory. Again, it's kind of the end of the train line here as far as the types of metrics that you want to track. All right, last but not least, because management is key. These are a few titles that have really shaped my own personal management style. This really aligns well with the way that Rapid7 looks at management. So at the end of the day, my job here is to make sure that every single person that works in managed detection and response has everything that they need to accomplish their job. The way that I like to say it is, they don't work for me, I work for them. That's really what it boils down to. They are the resources that are scarce. 1,000,001 leaders out there, some of them better than others, but ultimately, the finite resource in our industry is not leadership, it's not management, it's the individual contributor. So us as leaders, as folks that are running these kinds of businesses, our job is to make sure that they have everything that they need in order to be successful. So as a quick reminder, this is something that I encourage all incident detection response programs to adopt. Look, if your goal is to prevent a threat from happening in the first place, you're showing up to work depressed every single day because you know you're going to fail at that goal. If you set your goal to prevent a breach from causing material damage to your customer, to your organization, whatever reason you have for existing, then you have a fighting chance every single day that you show up at work. Then you can really raise the bar on locking that door on the attackers, on making sure that they are not successful no matter how hard they try. So with that, we do have the opportunity for some questions and answers. If you do have any questions, please go ahead and submit them through the Q&A widget that is part of this On24 presentation manager. So we'll give you a couple minutes. Craig and I will just sit here and stare at each other a little bit, but please ask questions if you have them. All right, so we have one coming in. Craig, you want to read it for us?
So we have one coming in. It says, what would you do if you were an overwhelmed IT staff and you are just tasked by your executives to start doing IDR? Or, for example, and I'm going to add on my own words to this, you had an incident, it was ransomware, now you have to call somebody in to do IDR. How do you approach a small company with a SOC plan? What do you see? How do you help somebody like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, at the end of the day, if you're not watching for threats every single minute and every single second of every single day, the attacker's going to figure that out, and they're going to find their way through. So for most small organizations, medium-sized organizations, they're not going to want to have to invest the $5 million that it just takes to get up and running with technology, with 24/7. But thankfully, there are providers out there like Rapid7 who are ready to kind of put our technology, put our experts to work for you. And really one of the benefits that you get with our approach is that we co-manage the technology. So you have your own use cases. You have your reasons to have a SIM, to have an EDR agent, to use user behavior analytics within your environment. So you should have the option to go out and buy a managed service, get the technology for your use cases, but then also be able to bring in a team of experts that is really there watching your back 24/7. Let it be our problem to find and attract the right people. Let it be our problem to make sure that you have the right skills to provide incident detection and response. Let us bring the technology. Let us maintain it. Let us build it. These are all things that you can offload to us and have the assurance that we're going to do the right things for you, that we're going to be transparent, and that we bring just the best people that there are to the table.
Awesome. I do have a question for you, Wade, and it is, when do you normally get involved? Do you seem to get involved with a company after an incident to follow up on, let's say, a first incident response and then talk about MDR, or are you working with them beforehand? Do you see customers planning or reacting? Is more of my question.
That's actually a great question. 10 years ago, it was purely reactive. The last managed service that I built, 99.9% of our customers literally came from the incident response world. So we had a whole division doing incident response, and that was our pipeline. What I have found here is the exact opposite is true, and I don't think it's a nature of previous employer versus Rapid7. It's just an evolution in an understanding of the breach. It's an evolution in admitting that, just like someone can pickpocket you when you're walking around New Orleans, someone can break into your environment. It's just something that we live with. So people are much more proactive these days about reaching out to us, and you can see the services evolve as a result. Today, I can't just be a black box service that just spits out threats whenever we identify them. Even if we were the best in the world at that, customers are not buying that anymore. They are buying the reactive, they are buying the proactive, they are buying the partnership, and that's ultimately what we have built here.
Kind of like just outsourcing everything else, just another thing that they're trying to outsource to save money.
Yeah, and so the outsourcing bit's an interesting one. Many organizations can get away with wholesale outsourcing IT and really not have any huge problems with it. If you wholesale outsource IDR and you just wash your hands of it, you are not going to be successful. This is a partnership. You can't just offload everything onto a provider. There are intricacies about your business, about your environment, about your people that need to be considered as part of incident detection and response. So while I'm not saying that you have to spend all day at a keyboard watching alerts go by, what I am saying is that when your provider says jump because something bad is happening, you probably need to be equipped to jump.
That sort of leads me into a question I was going to answer. It says, we have, and I've heard this in 20 different ways, is that we have nothing of value. Why do I need an IDR? And I always translate it back. I've even heard one of our customers say, our executives say, we're going to be attacked. So why do any prevention in the first place? I kind of liked your answer of the way you laid it out is you always want to do an antivirus. You always want to do these different things because that reduces your funnel size. If you do antivirus, you're going to save 70% of your work. You do some more prevention, you're going to get another 10 or 20%. So now you're up to having to work at 10% of your environment. My response to a lot of those customers say we have nothing of value is, of course you do. You have a customer list. You have invoices that go in and out. You have a web presence. If your web presence gets hacked, how do you protect against that? If you're sending out fake invoices or you're receiving fake invoices, which is a huge process right now, a huge incidents happening right now is with invoicing and stuff like that. Those are important. How many $50,000 invoices can you pay and still stay in business? So with that note, if anybody else has any other questions, please feel free to ask them. If not, we're going to reach out to do a follow-up with everyone to see if there's anything we can do to help you with your environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And one last question coming in before we kind of dive off of here. Look, I am fortunate that I am able to spend the money that I need to bring the people in to deliver the service that I can. That does not mean that this is a premium service. That does not mean that this is the type of service that you can only look at like the jewelry in the Tiffany window. We have priced this so that it is exceptionally competitive in the marketplace, even a little bit at kind of the lower end, depending on who you bucket us with. The way that we do pricing is really by endpoint, right? We try to be completely fair and say, for as simple as it needs to be, just price by endpoint. In that pricing, you can send us as much data as you want. We're not going to cap you. We're not going to do anything like that. So, realistically, the way that this offering was built was to minimize our risk, of course, as a business, but then also maximize the amount of data that you can tell us or you can give us, therefore maximizing our ability to detect and respond to threats within your environment. Excellent.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And this presentation will be available for replay probably in a couple days.